Welcome back. You are watching the Chamwada Report, and in this episode, we went London. We are looking at London transport systems and how a Kenyan, Professor Washington Ocheng, was involved in the transformation of transport systems there. I asked the Kenyan scholar what steps should be put in place in order to transform Nairobi's transportation.
And I'm saying this also from an Imperial College Center for Transport Studies interest in potentially helping with delivering the Nairobi's transportation goals, for example. So we start off, as I said earlier, with working with the stakeholders, including policymakers, to define what these key performance areas are. We do the indicators, we do targets in consultation with them. That leads to the development of the master plan. That process of developing master plan will have to have a very careful appraisal of the existing infrastructure, because we have to encompass that in the plan. The actual implementation phase, if you like, of the elements of that master plan will require expertise in different areas, not least technologically. So the idea here is, is not to go back to the drawing board, but at least to try to look at innovations that have taken place elsewhere. And the Center for Transport Studies has been at the forefront of those innovations as implemented, let's say, in the developed world. So what we would be doing is, within that control plan, we would be helping the Nairobi city to be able to optimally integrate the best technology at the appropriate time to gain the maximum benefits in that. The other thing that we would have to do is manage operations. So, for example, after implementation, there's also the concept of transport operations, okay, and how that actually works. So this is the way you operate the transportation network, making sure that day-to-day delivers what it should deliver. Transport basically drives the economy. We have tools within the Center for Transport Studies for measuring not just the impacts of the transportation system itself, but also the wider impacts on a country's economy. So this takes into account links. So, for example, you could be talking about the energy in air sector, and the question would be, is there a benefit that the energy sector gains from transportation investment, as opposed to just transporting people from A to B. So we call this the wider impacts of transportation investment. We can actually do that. But you can also even come to us when you're decommissioning, because decommissioning is not a question of just putting a bomb on a building and letting it blow up. Decommissioning is also to be done in a controlled way, and that also requires research expertise. Finally, for all of this to work, there has to be an owner. Somebody has to have ownership. And I think it would be interesting in the Kenyan context, in the Nairobi context, who that particular person or that particular entity actually is.
Still on short-term measures, the transport guru says with a reliable public transport in place, then you would easily convince commuters to leave the comfort of their cars.
I would extend the idea of private cars going into parking zones outside the city. I would extend it to that, in the sense that, but what I'm saying is, with a private car, the conveniences that people perceive to be associated with the private car would have to be addressed by the public transport, shuttle-based concept. So in the Western world, in the UK, we do have some cities that have what we call park and ride. The shuttles are brilliant, they are comfortable, they smell nice, they're comfortable. Actually very appealing, for example, to families. It can be made very attractive, but there are not two ways about it. Unless you're going to be draconian and legalizing, for example, or coming up with statutes that say thou shalt not drive, the private car would always be attractive to people in, not necessarily directly, but in perceived conveniences. And unless you address those perceived conveniences, it's going to be quite difficult.
In London, Transport for London, a local government body responsible for most aspects of the transport system in the city, plays the role of implementing the transport strategy and to manage transport services. It is responsible for London's network of principal routes for various rail networks, including the London Underground and the London Overground, as well as routes for buses. It also manages taxis, cycling and river services.
Transport for London itself is responsible for what you might call the legal framework of the operations of these buses. But actually the actual services are delivered by operators. who are private entities. So basically, Transport for London gives franchises through a competition process to potential operators who apply. So it's judged on the basis of those KPIs that I talked about. So how many people are you going to carry? What sort of level of environmental impact you're going to have? What will be your safety record? And how much will it cost to deliver? We are located routes, so basically it's a service zone.
Would the professor be willing to come back to Kenya in order to make a contribution to the transformation of transport systems in Nairobi?
We've made some potentially collaboration noises with one or two entities, but these have been basically based around universities. So we have actually been talking to the Technical University of Kenya in terms of trying to help them develop expertise in this area. Because that's another thing that's very important, I think. That it's one thing to have, external entities or the expertise of external entities flowing into the country, even if they themselves come to install or to implement, there needs to be local expertise. There is a level of lack of grasp of the complexity of the problem. That's one thing I feel. And to some extent, that is on the basis that I make that statement on the basis that I don't think there is enough local expertise in the area. That's the first thing. The second thing is that to address them, it will require quite a significant level of investment. So there is the question of the capacity of a nation or a developing nation to be able to do that. And the third thing is good governance. Obviously, is an issue. Not accusing anyone, but what I'm saying is that significant investment that's required would have to go in at that amount. It cannot go in at 10% less or 90% less, because what happens is that you probably end up getting what you think you wanted, but actually there would have been certain aspects of it would have been compromised, which would mean clearly that the life of the particular infrastructure is reduced, for example, or maybe it's not completely installed.
The professor's conclusion is that Kenyan professors have done well outside their country and they can contribute positively back home if allowed to work professionally.
Kenyan diaspora is the quality of it, at least the elements that I'm aware of, are world leading in every respect, and I'm not so sure that the country is exploiting, dare I say, this expertise. I think if you go to universities like Imperial College, Harvard, MIT, you will get Kenyans who are operating at the highest level, and I think we could benefit a lot as a country in engaging them, not just in transport, but also in other fields.
Sasa, now, in a nutshell, observers say it is not that there are no policies, and it is not just a matter of crafting policies. That in Kenya the problem is lack of implementation, vested interests, impunity, corruption, among other obstacles. The discussion continues online. You can use the hashtag on the screen. And until we meet again next time, same channel, I'm your host, Alex Chamwada. Thank you for watching.